killing of Rachel Wightman. The murder of a pretty young schoolmistress was always going to be big news, particularly when she had been popular, vivacious, and the niece, once removed, of one of the mayor's senior aides. Her death had dominated the front pages so completely that the day's other two main stories, the new wolf enclosure at the zoo and the unannounced bus strike, had barely received a mention. Josh Cole sat at his desk in his newsroom, trying to find a fresh angle for another story on Rachel Wightman's killing. The odd, slightly ritualistic way in which her body had been posed was already old news. There was little to say about her tragic death that hadn't already been said. The police were pursuing a short list of primary suspects, but it was far too soon to risk talking about them in print. Some bridges were just too important to risk burning. And anyway, discussing a short list of suspects was a great way to get sued. Thad Cable was a builder. He'd been working on the house next door to the Wightmans for a couple of weeks. He openly admitted to having noticed Miss Wightman and to finding her uncommonly attractive. But that was hardly uncommon. A friend of Cable's had characterised him as having a bit of a temper, but that was meaningless. According to the man himself, he'd been away from the worksite having lunch with his wife, Imogen, and her family. Imogen Cable had only been too happy to confirm that Thad had been with her, apparently. Even so, the police were still considering him as a possibility. The second suspect, Irvin Ingram, was Rachel's cousin. He was known to have visited the victim the previous evening, so was a suspect primarily by proximity. A cousin on her father's side, he had no connection to any city politicians, which automatically made him less intriguing journalistically, and he worked as a secretary in a financial office. The police report clearly didn't find him particularly interesting. During the hour or so between Rachel's last known movements and the discovery of her body, he'd been stuck in traffic on a bus heading downtown in order to fetch some reports that his boss required urgently from the bank that the firm was allied to. The final suspect, Will Blazer, had the most potential to be the murderer. An acquaintance of Rachel's, he had fallen deeply in love with her and had repeatedly attempted to pursue her. Although he had failed entirely to endear himself to the victim and had been gently but constantly rebuffed, he had broken down upon hearing of her death. According to the police reports, he consistently referred to her as the love of his life. It certainly seemed as if Mr. Blazer and reality were not on entirely close terms. He worked as an insurance salesman and claimed to have been in a long sales meeting all that lunchtime. Josh frowned as a detail hit him and then started scribbling. If he timed his call to the police carefully, the Sentinel would be the only paper covering the murder arrest the following morning. Who had Josh identified as the killer, and why? The solution to the killing of Rachel Wightman. Rachel's cousin, Irvin, claimed that he was stuck on a bus during the time of the murder, but the buses were on general strike, so he must be lying. After Josh pointed this out to his police contact, Irvin was arrested and quickly confessed. He'd been obsessed with his cousin for years and had finally attempted to propose. Her horrified refusal had driven him over the edge.